well, again, sorry for the confusion, everyone. We're lucky to have our 2 judges here tonight. They were picked for their very good performance in judging in previous sessions last year. So, and that's why we saved them for the best of the year. Anyway, we'll start with Cynthia. And Cynthia L. Keith is a native Washingtonian. Her love of photography started in a journalism class at Walt Whitman High School in Bethesda, Maryland, and over the years has led her to scenic locations from Alaska to Maine in search of landscape images. Her specialty is garden landscape photography, a marriage of her vision for the grand landscape and intimate flower portraits. Cynthia has been a member of the North Bethesda Camera Club since 1992, where she has exhibited, participated in numerous presentations, and served on multiple committees. She's a certified judge by the Maryland Photography Alliance and a frequent judge at camera clubs in the greater Washington area and beyond. Outside of photography, she has a BA in music and an MBA from the University of Maryland and holds the Chartered Financial Analyst designation. Cynthia has worked for several financial firms in Washington, D.C. area during her career as an investment manager. Okay, and our second judge, since it's a special night, Richard Lovrich began his career as a photographer, graphic artist, and producer in New York City, working in banking, pharmaceuticals, and fashion. As the Albany Times Union first art director, he spearheaded new sections and special editions, winning awards for illustration, design, general excellence, and writing along the way. Hired as Proctor's first art director in 2007, he ushered the theater's image through its period of explosive growth and acquisition, eventually serving as the creative director of Proctor's Collaborative. Richard's current studio serves clients across a broad range of industries, drawing upon an equally broad range of creative service options. Richard has recently released his book of short stories, Have a Very Bad Day. Hey, that came out today. Throughout, he continues to capture portraits of creatives, many included in his 2018 Albany Center Gallery retrospective, Makers 365. Thank you guys for being here again, and we look forward to hearing your reviews.
A little bit of change in procedures tonight. Sean couldn't make it, his wife's birthday. So Alan Wiggins has generously offered to step in, and he's gonna lead us through the competition tonight. And since Sean's not on, he can't use his host privileges and mute everybody. So can everybody please mute except for Alan and the judges?
All right. Do you want to start with the general or the monochrome? Does it matter?
That's up to you. We are are you asking the judges that?
Yeah, I was actually asking the judges.
Oh, it doesn't matter to us.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Let's all right. Everybody see that?
Beautiful.
All right, give me 1 second to okay. Is it large enough, or?
You're going to want to go full screen.
Yeah, it's not letting me go full screen here. Oh, there it goes. All right, now it's just delayed a little.
Ah, there we go.
All right. Well, I've got monochrome up. Sorry. Let's start with monochrome then. All right. Monochrome, end of year, digital image of the year for monochrome. I believe we've got 50 images, if I remember correctly.
Oh my God.
And first up is, it's not, hang on, let's see.
Yeah, it's not showing the maker.
Bear with me 1 second here.
Sure.
When I go full screen, it's not giving me the name.
Maker, yeah.
Oh, right.
So anyway, I'll do it.
Did you make sure they're in the right order now?
Yeah, I have them in the right order.
Okay.
I'm sure of that. And we have 50 monochrome. How am I going to keep track of that? Shoot, bear with me 1 second.
If you just close the 2 windows on each side, we can see pretty much
Yeah, let me do that then.
the whole thing.
Yeah,
Tab closes and closes.
Yeah,
is it better?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there, okay, that's there. All right,
So-
so we've got, and there's no, oh, this is Una by Doug Mitchell.
Wait, can I add something here? So the two judges, so they know that we're kind of expecting a short,
Yeah.
discussion, a short critique of each image.
Neil and Alan, what Cynthia and I did make her aware that we do, of course, speak to everyone's image. So we're going to go, unless there's an exception that we feel it's really important not to do so, we're going to each take one in order. So it'll
That's
be
perfect.
Cynthia
Okay.
can start with the first
Perfect.
one, and because otherwise we'll be here till midnight, and we'd both love to address all of them, but we know that's probably not practical. So.
Okay.
So Cynthia, take it away.
All right, we're on. So this image is, the thing that makes this image stand out is the lighting, obviously. From the window to the doors in the back, the drapery of the bed sheets and the texture that you see there. The photographer did a very nice job controlling the light. As you've heard me talk about before, our eye goes to the brightest part of the image. And that's really where you want your viewer to go here, is to the model. And so the photographer did a great job. The shadows aren't blocked up, but you can still see the image, and it has a lot of atmospherics is the wrong word for an indoor image, but the quality of the light is really the key here.
Okay, next up. The Road to Valhalla by Neil Shapiro.
Yeah, Cynthia and I were discussing when I was way back at Parsons School of Design many years ago. We always, I had taught photography in high school and to other students. And at Parsons, we used to say we had a lot of very wealthy students. It was like, go to an interesting place, take an interesting picture, and that is very true of this case. But of course, it has to be well taken as well. And I think this photo is very well taken. It's a terrific moment. That cloud behind the hill on the left really made it for me. That separation, that just completely locked it and made it very special. But it's lovely, it's interesting. I want to be there. And the technical aspects of it are terrific as well. It's just a wonderful picture.
Next up. The Stairs by Marguerite Hill.
Lots of different graphical elements to this image. The curvature at the top in juxtaposition to the horizontal lines of the stairs, the shadows, which add depth and interest to it. The key here is, a very broad tonal range from the sky in the far distance to the shadows underneath the stairs. So an excellent job of tone and control of the lighting as well.
Yeah, I agree on that one. And I would also say that it's very reminiscent of like Rodchenko's work, like early Russian, like experimental photography. It's just, it's really old school and very sturdy. I love it.
Next up. Rockport, Joan Heffler.
Yeah, this is another one of those, you definitely want to be there where this shot was taken, right? Lovely tones throughout, lovely composition. I own a few very wide lenses and rarely use them. And I'm not sure whether I would have used exactly as wide a lens for this shot, but I think it does work here. It does allow for a little, for me, slightly extraneous stuff like the little boat on the upper right hand corner, which takes me out of the frame a tiny bit. So I'm left a tiny bit wondering exactly where the photographer wanted me to look. But a lovely shot taken in a lovely place. Thank you. I want to go there. How's that?
Light in Alhambra. Sally Wilson.
Like the one with the stairs, this is all about the shadows and the shapes and the juxtaposition of the grate on the doorway here, the windows above it, the difference between the geometric below and the more circular above. And then the play of the light on the walls, which themselves are very textured. The photographer did a great job. The angle here is interesting as opposed to just straight on. And the texture, you can really feel the texture in the walls.
Next. Eye on the Eye, Marty Bannon.
Yeah, this is a very, I wondered when I looked at this actually. I know, it's a picture of the eye. It's an unusual cropping of it, and of course that's what makes it more interesting. I think the meteorological conditions are kind of cool too. I love that little cloud on the right and the clarity of it. I don't think a picture needs always to be super sharp, but the fact that this picture is so sharp serves it well, because I actually got into looking at all the little people in the cars too. So it's an interesting shot of an interesting place. And again, I always thank our photographers for bringing us to these wonderful places where they've been.
Owl, Sharon Silversmith.
Well, again, this is texture. The photographer does a great job of controlling the light here on the bird, on the chest of the bird and their feathers, which you can see all the details there. And you can see enough detail in the background to give it a place, but not too much that's distracting. Again, your eye goes to the bright spot, which is the bird, and the background is really of no consequence here. Good portrait.
I wonder, Cynthia, if this was a color picture, would you like it as much?
I think the color may, depending on what it was, may have detracted, depending on how colorful the background is.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think this is a lovely black and white picture.
That Tree is to Die For, Jonna Kaywood.
Yeah, it's funny. I just had a meeting about Halloween and about a client. They're doing a haunted house and I'm advising them. Yeah, this is very haunted and lovely. Trees without leaves have kind of haunted me, my photographic career. They're not all that easy to capture in an interesting way. And this, by allowing, I think, the tree to completely overtake the frame, and it is a good tree too, right? Let's give the tree some credit. But allowing it to take over the frame completely like that really cinched the deal for me. And it has these creepy associations with human veins, and it's pretty cool and pretty scary. I would have, for me, and I'm only looking on my computer at this time, I would have liked if we just dodged out the headstone a little bit, because I didn't catch it right away. But that's pretty minor. And again, it could just be because of the method of transmission completely. But again, a very creepy picture, and it works. Definitely creeps me out.
Whispers, Elena Casey.
Yeah, this is well done as a high key image, because it gives that ethereal feel that the seed pods here have. And that, I think the photographer did a great job in communicating that, that parts of it, as you can see, are not fully in focus, but that's okay. It really draws your eye to the part that is. They're in the lower part of the image. The diagonals of the veins of the seed pods here give it some dynamism. And again, I think the choice of high key here was the right one.
Mocha Windows and Shadows, Linda Tomasula.
I wonder where this was shot. Was this shot at Mass Mocha, I wonder?
Yes.
Photographer. Yeah,
Yes.
I figured. Yeah, really cool. I like the juxtaposition as Mass Mocha exemplifies the juxtaposition of the modern and the industrial. And yeah, and you caught it. You were wise to shoot it when you did. You caught it at a lovely time, and there's a lot to say. So it's a picture that you could come back to, I think, many times. And again, I appreciate pictures that are simple enough that I can imagine that they came from an earlier era in photography. And this is, and black and white, of course, helps in that regard. This is another picture that I think in color would not have been very interesting to me, but I do think it's a very successful black and white shot.
David by Kim Koza.
Interesting study here in the lighting, and especially as you look at the gentleman's clothing and how the rim of the lighting there is playing on his sleeves and the front of his shirt or jacket here. The hands are a little bright versus the face. Again, you want the viewer to, we as humans like to look at the eyes. It draws us in. And I think if the hands had been a little darker, more in the tone of the shadows, then it really would have drawn us to his face and to his eyes. But it's a good use of this lighting and interest in the texture of the clothing.
Photo ops in every direction. Linda Kosovo.
Yeah, a shooter shooting shooters. That's really cool. But yeah, it's, again, it shouldn't be quite as interesting as it is, but it really is a lovely moment. The landscape itself would have been, frankly, interesting enough as a photograph. Like if you retouched all these people out, it would still be a lovely photo, which is, so they're a very interesting addition, like humans in this little landscape, and different in that regard for me. And again, it's photographers. It's a very lovely shot. But again, I appreciate it. Even just the landscape portion of it, I think is very lovely. I love that mist on the, can't beat mist on the lake, right? It's a cheap shot. We love that shot.
Sunburst and Shadows, Alan Wiggins.
Mhm. So, and Richard was mentioning using the wide angle lenses and using them to effect. I think that's done here. As you can see, it brings in the whole cityscape that we're looking at, but it really emphasizes this arched part of the building in the foreground, which is really the key here. The shadows that it's casting draw your eye directly towards that arch, and to the person there in the foreground. It's really the arch that is the key. And I wonder what it would look like without the person, if that would be worse, because the arch is so alluring here.
Yeah, it's I'm sorry, but it's so true. And I love, by using this lens, that building is now forcing the other buildings to its will, like bending them, and which is just such a cool idea. And I agree with you. I might like the picture even more, perhaps, without the person. Great shot.
Survival, Neil Shapiro.
Yeah, I'm a portrait guy, and I belong to a few portrait groups online, including the Leica portrait group, and we probably have too many members. But I was speaking with the director the other day, and so many of the pictures are just, they're nice, and this picture is not nice. Obviously, this just shows a person not necessarily at their best moment in their life, and we can learn a lot from the picture because of that. And the composition is also quite interesting. I'm kind of cropping it with my hand here, but because she has her hand out, we don't know why. Begging maybe, but to whom we don't know. Because the hand is out, it does interestingly utilize or begs the question of that space on the left. So it's a very interesting composition that makes us wonder what's just out of frame, which is very successful. So again, I love the fact that our photographer took us to a place that perhaps we will never go.
My brother, Dal Smith.
Mhm. So as opposed to the high key, notice here that everything except the gentleman's face is dark black. No interference with that, even his shirt, just dark hues, so it doesn't distract us from the face. And I think perhaps a little more contrast in the face, a little more use of the shadows could have really brought out more of the texture in his beard, the lines of his face, etc. As it is, he looks a little ghostly, but perhaps that's the impression that the photographer wanted to give us. If so, that's exactly what happened. So well done. Nice portrait.
Sunflower from behind, Joe Catronio.
Yeah, this is a picture again where our new world of high contrast images really serves it. I think if it were not high contrast, I'm sorry, but highly detailed images. It's a large file, and I don't think I would be as in love with this picture were it not so detailed. The detail is an important actor in this composition. I love the fact that it goes totally to black. So Marty, could you silence yourself? I think it's Marty.
Yeah, I just got in here. I just found, okay, hang on
Yeah,
a
just-
second.
Thanks. Anyway, the contrast I really love, and there are beautiful tones in it. And again, the really very detailed nature of it teaches us a lot about this flower that we wouldn't see, and that frankly I haven't noticed before with a sunflower either. So it's a successful shot because of that. I always try to recompose these things slightly. I'm not quite sure that there might not be a little bit more room on the right than I want, because I want my eye to, I know that Cynthia rightly talks about us looking at the brightest thing, but in this case, the brightest things are bringing us to the center. They're drawing our eye to this center, this creature of a flower. And I think the composition might possibly be slightly changed to accentuate that, but a lovely shot. And again, nice camera, lens situation.
Contemplation, Claudia Jakubowski.
So, even in black and white, and perhaps more so in black and white, we can really create a mood. And I think in your mind's eye, if this was high contrast, the blacks were blacker and the whites were more prominent, would we get this same feeling of a lonesome person contemplating whatever, as the title said? I think the mood that they have created here certainly fits with the title and communicates that story of this person sitting alone out in the middle of nowhere, with, I guess, some sort of city in the distance. Why is she separating herself? What is she looking at down that hill, etc.? So I think from that standpoint, it communicates a lot.
It's a movie still too, isn't it, Cynthia?
Mhm.
Doesn't it look like it's very Panavision? If you were to tell me this came from a film from, I would say, of course, yes, I want to see it.
Yeah.
Stone peas in a pod, Marty Bannon.
I found this, I was very much drawn to this picture. The grain, quality, the fact that the stones seem to have this sympathetic relation, if they're stones, the wrapped around, they seem to have this strange sympathetic relationship with one another. I don't know if I'm looking at very large boulders or small stones. It's very compelling as a graphic piece. Again, this could be a picture from the early days of photography when people really were experimenting at bending the mind and capturing things that were unusual. And I like it very much for that regard. There's a little odd thing going on, and again, it could be just the method of transmission here, where there's like a checkerboard going on in the grain. And again, that could be simply the resolution of my screen banging into this image. So that may not be a real comment, but sometimes I've seen this something like this happen by shooting at 6,000 ISO or higher. But again, I like the picture. The darks and lights are lovely. It's the tones are just great. It's high contrast with a grain kind of sensation. It's very interesting. And Cynthia, if you could silence yourself too, because occasionally you just pop up on the screen.
The Eagle, Marguerite Hill.
It's the thing that makes this image is the intensity of that stare. you know, look at the eyes, the fact that it looks like his brow is a little furrowed, which I don't know that really that is, but that in a human standpoint, that's what it communicates, that he's intensely staring down something. It would be interesting to see what that something was, of course. But it certainly does capture that. And as Richard said a few minutes ago, think about, you know, the cropping, etc., of some of these images and where your eye goes. You want it really to be focused right on that bird and on that face, and not so much maybe on the floor or ground that he's standing on, or the background. So think about that sometimes. This is a beautiful bird.
Yeah, he might be saying, why am I in here with this effing Tupperware?
Grand Central Bride, Alan Wiggins.
I from Manhattan and love shots of Grand Central Station. It is called Bride. I don't quite. It took me a moment to like. It was a little Where's Waldo for me for just a moment. So to me, maybe the best shot happened a fraction of a second later when that blurry walking figure was not integrated into the bride, and she'd be more distinct against the background. But I do love this is a portrait of a people's as opposed to a portrait of people. And I don't think we take enough of these pictures as photographers. We're always trying to focus on one thing. So I do like the fact that this is a portrait of a group of people at a certain time, dressed in a certain way. That yeah, which is to me, that's what I like about it.
Fluttering and dancing in the breeze, Jonna Kaywood.
This is another one of those mood capturing images, and it has to do with the fog, the haze that you see off of, I guess, this lake here on the left-hand side and extending up into the sky. You know, think again in your mind's eye, if it had been a bright sunny sky with a bunch of puffy clouds, we wouldn't have gotten this same message at all. And as we talked about the trees a few minutes ago, the fact that this tree is silhouetted against that very muted sky also, you know, communicates that eerie kind of solitude. And also because you don't see any ripples on the water, etc., even though, you know, you may have some leaves falling and stuff like that, what you have here is a very serene, quiet moment.
Mournful, Sharon Silversmith.
Yeah, when we were looking over these pictures together, she said, "Wow, what a portrait!" And I couldn't agree more. It's a great portrait of. I would say that this is allowed in we're allowed to anthropomorphize here and use this lovely creature in a gallery of human pictures. It's just so it transmits so much, and there's so much of the humanity, if you will, of this creature comes through, and everything about it. I like the framing. Is he in a little jail? Makes me feel sorry for him or her. It's terrific, and again, it's a shot that's very sharp and very detailed, and I think that serves this image very well. It kind of looks again very timeless. This barn situation this animal's in looks like it could be from certainly the beginning of the last century. It's a really there's nothing of our modern age in this picture, and it's just again, it's a very lovely creature, very beautifully photographed.
Giraffe mugshots, Joe Petronio.
Yes, it's exactly what it is, right? They're posing for the camera. Again, here's another high key type of image, so that their background doesn't interfere with what this the real topic is, which is these two lovely creatures here. I think that the thing that that works here is that there is different views of their heads. Notice the one on the right, his ears are sticking out and he's looking at you. The one on the left seems a little calmer, etc. You can put all sorts of a story to it. It's just a fun image, something that you would use to illustrate a children's book or something, and everyone would love it.
Coffee break. Rich Schreibstein.
Yeah, another interesting portrait, right? A person certainly at work. Maybe it's pretty obvious, perhaps, that this person did not know their picture was being taken until the last minute and maybe wasn't bothered to give their permission. And I think that's just great. And unfortunately, or fortunately, that's the way I shoot because I don't. We're in an age of people who know what they look like on camera. And if you give people a moment to pose, you'll end up with a bunch of flat pictures. So I think it's great that we get to see this guy uh, doing it. It's good composition as well. I really like the fact that the wall on the left falls off again and becomes bright like that. It's a very interesting. He's compacted. He's crushed between these two planes, and I love the space on the right as well. So I might have tried a crop that got rid of just that one little strip border on the right. It's not a drop dead kind of thing, but it is if you crop that darker gray vertical on the right, then that other plane seems to go on forever. And I'm getting the feeling I might have preferred that slightly because it would have just spoken to this kind of vastness that goes out on that side that is implied by the composition already. Again, pretty minor though, and a good shot of an actual person at an actual time on Earth. A guy wearing a hoodie, which wouldn't have happened at the turn of the last century, right, or the middle. So it's very of its time and a great portrait.
Heaven on the Mountain. Janice Pritchett.
So here, this one is all about meteorology and the events that happen in the higher elevations, right? So we have the sun breaking through the clouds. We've got the God beams there that give you a feel for it's breaking up now. You know, things are getting better. You've got the remnants of the snowstorm there that really highlights the trees, which gives it the texture there on the far hills of the vertical trees standing in a line. And we see just enough of rocks in the foreground, trees in the middle, and in the distance that it gives you a layered effect. It makes you walk into visually the image. So nicely done.
Dog Day Afternoon. Rich Schreibstein.
Yeah. So of course, this picture, we look at it and wonder, was the photographer waiting for the dog to turn around? Was that the reason for the picture? Were they instead trying to take a picture of the couple and then the dog just popped his head in? So it's fun for that reason. And again, crop meister here. I think I would have cropped the tip of the guy's boot out a little bit because I see just a little bit of that other person, which I kind of don't want to see. I just want to see that there are these two people and the dog, not any suggestion of anything else going on. We are storytellers, right? As photographers. So sometimes I think we need to be a little more clear about exactly what it is that we're saying. And if you can easily edit something out, which takes us off the storyline, then why not do it? What a cute dog though. And he looks like the smartest person in the group, which is great. I really I dig that.
Misty Coast. Bill Lanahan.
I'm getting all the moody pictures. Eat your heart out.
You definitely are.
Yeah. So again, what creates mood? Well, the first thing is you see here it's low contrast, which gives you this sense of eeriness, right? You've got the haze or fog in the sky. Notice the waves are minimal. We don't have big crashing waves here, so it gives you a feeling of tranquility, as well as there's not a soul in sight, no buildings, very remote feeling to it. So I think that all of those things add up to give you a feeling of quietude and solitude. So well done in communicating that.
The King, Sean Sullivan.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a car buff, so I like pictures of cars very much. Again, a cropping thing. this is dead. This is such a centered picture that the fact that there's even a micron off of spacing right and left, it doesn't serve it perfectly. It's we're surprisingly good at understanding if something's perfectly centered or if there's a little bit more, like in this case, I see a little bit more on the right. But a terrific mug to capture, by the way. If you're going to do a portrait of a car, you could do a lot worse than an Edsel. I think this is an Edsel. And it's, again, with the King license plate, it has a real story to tell. And it's been loved, this car, and customized by someone. And the customizations don't look like they're contemporary. They look like they're really old. So it really is a peek at an interesting car. Again, it's a portrait. And it's a very cool portrait of a cool car. By the way, the King and the Edsel are both dead.
I'm having a slight issue here. It's not advancing.
Locking up on you?
Yeah.
Happens.
Ah. Hmm.
Don, he broke it for us.
Yeah, Sean did it. He wants us to look at this Edsel forever.
Exactly.
All right, I'm
Great
gonna stop
tones.
sharing it and come back into this. Hang on one second.
Yeah, since we're stuck, there are great tones in the picture too, right? I didn't address that, but it really is beautifully toned. So I have to admit, when I look at the landscapes, and this isn't a good, bad thing, it's just I have the urge to kind of be in that shot and try, oh, let me try a little lower. And does anybody else here dream that, like, or wish they could have like a 20-foot ladder from time to time? Right? You're
Yep.
shooting, it's like, oh my God, if only I could make that, so those two hills don't touch. If only I could have a 20, maybe a 40-foot ladder. I need a cherry picker, actually, in the back of my car.
Between that and wanting a llama or a Sherpa to carry all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, the same thing's true with, we talked about the bare trees, you know. Sometimes the shot is so perfect if it wasn't for that one tree. Makes me wish I was carrying a chainsaw as well. There we go. We're back with Ed the Edsel.
It's, there we go. Okay. With Benny Viddy selfie, Ron Klein.
Another high key. So it really does emphasize these shadows from the columns in the front, which, like one of the other images we saw a few minutes ago, draws you into the image, into the architecture at least, and then the positioning of the people in the middle of the sunny parts, and their shadows then being cast. I think this is one of those times, as Richard was saying, you wish, oh, if only the gentleman on the right disappeared, or the girl walking into the image on the left disappeared, then we could really get the full effect of the people who are posing in the shadow, in the right areas there. But I think, you know, it is what it is when you're doing street type photography. You know, you can always direct everyone to stand just where you want them.
View from the river, Dan Steen.
So this reminds me of New Orleans. I don't know if that's where it is, but it reminds me of New Orleans. An interesting composition. It does kind of distort or kind of robs me of the ability to exactly understand what the objects are, not being a maritime expert, which I kind of like. So they're just reduced to compositional elements, as opposed to there's a bridge and there's a, yeah, I don't know exactly. Again, I think I'm seeing part of a bridge and part of a dock. Like, it doesn't matter. I like the shapes. I like the sky. Again, I guess Cynthia and we're being cast in the role of weathermen tonight as well. There's an awful lot of weather going on. And yeah, it's taken, I think, at a very good time. There's an awful lot going on tonally. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say. Very lovely composition.
The Valentine, Fred Moody.
So the thing about street photography is, what do you put your people in front of, or vice versa? What background do you want people to walk in front of? So obviously timing becomes the issue. If you want to see more of the background and less of the people, you have to wait for them to be in the right position. So the photographer timed it well, that this person is not standing in front of the poster on the wall there, and is less detailed. You can't tell really their form very much because of the blur, etc., as opposed to the background, where you can see every detail in that poster. So it's an interesting way to have focused it. Think again, what if you did the opposite? What if the person was tack sharp and the wall was out of focus? Would that have communicated the same thing? Is that what you were looking for? What drew you to this? I think in this case, obviously, the photographer was drawn to the wall and the picture there.
The Ghosts of Olana, Greg Effner.
Yeah, Alana again. What a terrific place to take pictures, right? To take pictures of and to take pictures from, frankly. And sometimes when we're in very beautiful places, this is a weird admission. I find it sometimes difficult to take a personal photograph because they're so lovely in the way they present themselves that you just kind of shoot them straight, like you're shooting a postcard from the 50s. So this is lovely because it's a very personal, and it's using a lens that distorts. The shadow of the tree overtakes the architecture. So it is far from a simple postcard. It has it's definitely the mind and eye of the photographer are very apparent here, and to good end. And it's a good example for all of us, I think, to not allow the perfection of something that's incredibly beautiful to tell us what to shoot. This photographer was thinking on their feet and shot exactly what they're showing us exactly what they want. Cropmeister again, I might have cropped a little bit of that tree bending out on the left is making me look that way a little bit. Think of it hanging in someone's home for maybe years, where you're going to look at the picture many, many times over and over again. There are times that I'd be drawn in that direction in ways that don't benefit this picture at all. So very minor comment, but in overall very lovely. And again, I thank our photographer for bringing us to such a lovely place.
Along with his phone, Dow Smith.
You know, Richard mentioned a few minutes ago a picture of our time. This is a picture of our time, you know. 30 years ago, this guy would have been sitting here smoking a cigarette or something. He wouldn't have been staring at the device in his hand. So it is definitely a picture of our time, and the title, Alone with His Phone, certainly goes to that. Have we become more solitary because we're always on our phone and we're not trying to interact with one another? Good question. You could write a story about this for your newspaper there, Richard, and or your book, and use this as cover art for it. You know, so I think it certainly tells that story.
Cynthia, you did what I did as well. You called it Alone with His Phone, and it's actually along with his phone, but it should be alone. It really, alone is, it's such a, yeah, and yeah, you're right in every regard. Very, and lovely, a lovely composition too, right?
Diamond Beach, Janice Pritchett.
What the hell's going on in this picture? It's really crazy. This is just nuts, and it plays with our normally chips of ice are small or icebergs are big. So what are these things? Definitely a strange place that our photographer has brought us to, and I thank them for that. But totally peculiar. I think the azimuth is, I think, the right word, like the height, having shot, I think, lower to the ground than is natural, really helps here. I'm not 100% certain that the figure on the left that I like, actually, it's very interesting to have a person there. The figure on the left is a little blown out because of the light source, and I wonder. This isn't, again, a direct criticism, just that a wonder. I wonder what would have happened if we burned in a little bit on the left and didn't have that lower contrast light source thing as an element in this picture. I wonder if I might like it even better. But it's wonderful. It's wonderfully strange, and I really dig wonderfully strange pictures. And it's I think is this? I wonder if it's Iceland. It's got ice in it. No, Iceland has no ice, right? Greenland has no green, and Iceland has no ice.
No,
Yeah, so
this,
I do.
this is ice.
And
It's
where is it?
It's in Iceland,
In Iceland. Wow.
and it
Right.
washes up from a ice lagoon onto the ocean, onto the beach.
What a cold place. Better you than me, but thank you for bringing us there. My feet feel cold looking at it.
Hook, chain and pulley. Bill Olivo.
It's like a good, well seen by the photographer to find this design element. Like an interesting juxtaposition against the horizontal part of this wall with the logs versus the chains, which are, you know, almost artistically placed. And it makes you think, okay, what were they really going to use them for in this location right up against this wall? And you've got hooks and pulleys and who knows. So it does make you think. And it looks almost like a lady's necklace, you know, think of something that you would have, a lady would have around her neck. So it makes you think even more, because that's certainly not a lady behind those chains. So well done.
Sink by a window, Dan Steen.
Yeah, this looks like some of the historical sites we have here in Schenectady as well. I like being in this room. I like the tones in it. I'm not completely sold that this is the best shot that could have been taken from this angle. And there are just too many variations to really comment on that any even more. But it is I love the tones. I like the fact that my eye is being drawn by the very interesting chair rail and the other rail. It's a very interesting set of architectural norms for whatever period this is from. It's a little surprising. Again, I'm drawn to thinking there might have been a slightly different composition, but not knowing exactly what that is, I won't push that any further. Because I want, maybe it's that there's a little extra space on the right and my eye's getting kind of lost in it. So it's not, if you hold your hand and draw it in from the right, until it covers some of that round cover in the foreground and gets close to that chair, but not really too close, then your eye now is forced. The velocity happens to the left, and your eye is forced to the left in a more extreme manner. And the way it is now, there's a slight urge to center the image, and I don't think that was the intention. But anyway, a little picky about composition, but very lovely set of tones.
Moses, Fred Moody.
Yeah, here I go with the moody images again. And you know, if we didn't have the clouds in the sky, would this be an effective photograph? It's all about the clouds. And for those of you who are Bible scholars know that, okay, so Moses is talking to God. Here we have the light symbolizing God, etc. The fact that we can't see any details in the person other than the hands really sets your mind to wondering, okay, what is this? But also notice what the photographer has done here to try and make it look old, etc. Notice the border around the image that has been added there. We don't see any detail at all in the ground or the foreground there. So it was to tell a story, and that's what they did.
Yeah, we saw this in one other picture this evening too, Cynthia, didn't we? Where you have what we used to do is in the enlarger, in the film holder, we used to get a file and file it out a little bit so that we could actually create our own custom version of that blacked out edge. And that was in the 70s. That was a very 70s thing when I was still working in dark rooms. My lungs are very unhappy about that. But and despite the fact that it's a vertical, this makes me think again of a movie still, but from a long time ago. And if it were more sharp, I can assure you that I would find it less interesting. The fact that it's blurry makes it seem like, I mean, it could be a statue now. I'm not sure, but all that not sureness makes it really cool and kind of odd, scary.
Memories of Greece, Ron Klein.
Yeah, I was fairly recently, 4 years ago, I was in a place with olives and didn't take a picture this good. So I give a lot of credit to the photographer. It's a lovely shot of the plant form and makes us look at this. The background is out of focus in a delightful way that makes it look like one of the like an old photo backdrop in an old studio. So there's just an awful lot to like and to find interesting in this picture. I'm pushing my head down a little bit if I were there to create maybe a tiny bit of light between the leaf on the left and the tree. And maybe the photographer took that picture too and it didn't work, and it could very well be. But I like this picture a lot. It makes me wonder, it makes me think. And again, it's a very typical image. It's just a little bit of a set of olives, but it says so much more than that. So I like it. It seems on my screen, at least right now, slightly toned as well. And I like that tone. I truly like everything about this picture. And it makes me, again, want to be there. Maybe I need to go somewhere.
Farmhouse, Sean Sullivan.
Here we have another interior image. And I think the key here is that if you look right smack in the middle of the image, that's not really very interesting. So it's the windows on the sides and the old stove on the far left that are of interest. And the windows, because they're brighter, we look at those first. The stove, because it is large and on the side and darker, we look at that too. So I think there's a lot of good things going on with the lighting here. I think in post-processing, probably add to some of the drama in this room to really force the viewer to look at the most interesting parts of the image. You know, for example, the old sewing machine in front of the window. You have to look a lot at this image before you start to see it. But if that was darker, if there was more contrast there, because it's in front of the bright window, you would notice it right away. So a little more post-processing on the lighting, but otherwise nice and sharp in the image.
Too Many Battles, Bill Lenahan.
So this is I don't know what battle they're recreating, but he got the hairstyle just right. It's great. And again, a lovely portrait that was obviously not telegraphed a great deal, and there isn't a lot of warning for the subject, which makes it far more valuable. And whatever that natural background is, it could be a photo backdrop, but of course it's part of a tent, probably, and it's just there doing what we use backdrops for, really isolating the image. And you think if this was taken and there were a field in the background, getting confused with his hair and all the other texture, he just wouldn't pop. So I like the fact that this is it becomes a studio photograph taken in nature of this person who's not prepared to be shot, which is all of those things make it a great shot. And I don't know what era it was taken, because obviously this person is wearing the clothing of another era, and that's good too. All that lovely bizarreness and confusion, but makes me want to know more for certain.
Peer Judgment, Phil Olivo.
So here the lighting is pleasantly supplied for you by the stagehands. But I think the thing obviously that makes this image is the young ladies sitting in the foreground, and that you can see them watching the stage. the lighting on that also is nice because it's not as bright, notice, as the lady on stage. So that you go to her first and then to the audience. So from that standpoint, it's done very, very well. Excuse me. The moment is obviously artistic with her face turned slightly away, her hands in pose, etc. So it was good timing on the part of the photographer.
White sycamore tree, Greg Effingham.
Yeah, this would, if you were to tell me this was infrared, I'd say yeah. So it is that, it might indeed be a tree that looks just like this, which is completely bizarre. It's a, because of that, of course, it's very interesting, and it pops against the sky. It's almost like in the old days, this would have been a red filter shot, right, with our film, and or an orange filter, and that's kind of cool about it. So it takes that retro feeling. I'm not certain again whether compositionally, if I kind of want to see less of the trunk and crop up on it a tiny bit, or a little more and show a little bit of ground. I feel like we're in a tantalizingly not exactly right composition. I'm going to do this. Hold on for a second. I'm going to crop that from the bottom. I think if I crop out that very tiny piece of land on the bottom, then I'm forced only to consider the tree, which of course was the point here. And this is the star of the photograph. So again, if the ground was important, I think the photographer needed to show us a little more, but in this case, but again, a really cool tree. And who among us here would not have stopped to take a picture of this tree, right? It's such a cool object. And flies in the face of all like bare trees that we normally see.
Honorable mentions. We have 4 honorable mentions. Lotus Eyes, Sally Wilsey.
And this was one of Richard's favorites because he thinks it's a creature from another land. And he spent a lot of time counting the number of eyes he could see. But this is a fun image. You know, it makes you think, as he likes to say, it kind of freaks you out a little bit. But the photographer did a good job in finding this subject matter and photographing it to get the maximum effect that they were trying to show here with the eyes, quote unquote.
Rim light.
Here we are. We're in reversal mode here. This was a
Beautiful.
favorite of Cynthia's initially. Not that I didn't like it myself, but it was one that she liked especially well. And it is a really, really lovely portrait. It probably was some intention going on, but it didn't necessarily have to be that way. It could just as easily be that the photographer found this subject and just turned and shot them. But it's the modeling on the face could not be more lovely, and it just creates the most wonderful. And the fact that it goes dark and falls off on the right, it's a wonderful way to see a person. And it's funny, I just designed a website for someone, and it was meant to speak to traveling nurses. And I chose a picture where the person's eyes were closed. And in this case also, we don't see a person's eye. And I chose it because of all the pictures that I saw with the eyes. It was just, oh, what a beautiful person. Oh, she's so beautiful. And with the eyes taken away, you were forced to, first of all, it was more easy to relate to generally, if that makes any sense. Like I can relate to where that person is. And they were dreamy, by the way, in the woods. And in this case, this person obviously seems to have the kind of features that people find attractive, but it becomes more than that by robbing her of some of that loveliness, which is the eyes, and it makes it a little more mysterious, makes it a little more universal, and adds a little bit of mystery. So yeah, really lovely shot.
Next honorable mention, Daisy in Window, Claudia Jakubowski.
And the wonderful high key image. A lot of thought has gone into the placement here of the flowers, which you can see clearly, as well as the stems even in the vase here, and the amount of water, etc. There's a lot of thought that has gone into this image, and it's wonderfully shot.
Yeah, it really is the kind, we were saying, this is again of a time period for me. It's very 1970s, the kind of picture you might even see in a fashion magazine, you know, taken by Irving Penn. It's a pretty cool capture.
Next honorable mention, Upwards Rain, Elena Casey.
Ah, this is one that Cynthia had so many wonderful things to say. So many of the things I'll say, I'm going to parrot from Cynthia's voice because they were so valuable. And that really we could talk all night about this picture, about all the things that are going on that are so cool in it. I'll start with the background, all those, the fact that it's broken up into all those cubes is terrific, and dark and light, and gives us another way to appreciate this terrific display of water that makes it a pointillist image, I guess, and not too sharp, as Cynthia pointed out, not so sharp that it's just like, oh, water, and not so blurry. Really cool, especially down on the lower right there, you can see that the water was moving at high velocity and become little streaks. And then we've said all of that, and the incline of those bars coming through. We've said all these things, and then we have the cool kid who couldn't be cuter, and she's just doing exactly the right thing, and the one little foot off the ground, and just everything about it. It's an exceptional picture, just terrific.
And the winner is The Seamstress by Doug Mitchell.
Yeah, this was an easy choice for us. We both agreed on the outstanding nature of this image, everything from the lighting to the subject matter, to the texture on the wall, on the dresses, on the chair, that it has all of those elements. And as Richard has said on a number of these images, it looks like something that could have been shot, 50 or 100 years ago, and developed in a darkroom, not in a computer. And that it also begs the story behind it. So the title being The Seamstress, but what's the deal? So we have a dress that looks like a child's dress that's hanging, and then we have something that looks bigger, perhaps for an adult, on the chair, and it really makes you think and wonder, which is a great photo.
Yeah, it really does. And since this is the winner, we should both chime in, I think, on the winners. It's just everything that Cynthia said, and again, it could be from a very early movie frame because it is such a good story. Are they dead? That's what my first thought. Are the people who were just in this picture? Were they on their way to the picture and died, or did they leave the picture and die? But sorry to put them to death, but it is just it's a great story. And again, it's super timeless, which is terrific. And the composition is a little peculiar, right? Because it's a little tight on the right and the left, but I don't mind that at all because it creates a little tension. And if it was a little wider, it would be maybe nicer. And I don't think it definitely wouldn't have as much drama. So just a lot to see. And again, one that you could hang in your home and maybe a couple of years later say, wow, I never saw that, or I've never felt this way about it before. It really has quite a lot to say. Terrific.
Congratulations, Doug.
Yes,
Nice
Doug.
image. All right.
Congratulations, everybody. Great selection.
Nice images.
Moving on to general.
I was going to critique your picture. Well, we see now we have this gentleman here with a t-shirt.
What are you looking at? Oh, me. Let me get sharing here.
It's lower resolution, almost like a zoom, like a zoom picture. Yeah.
Boom and boom. See that, right? We have 58 in the general category. So
I think it's
first
my
up,
turn.
The Lost Train, Doug Mitchell.
Obviously, a lot of wonderful processing here and real intention on the part of the photographer to tell a particular story. And while many pictures, we really want the photographer to kind of not be there, you know, right? And just to like let us look at the picture. But in this case, I applaud the photographer for creating this, for overlaying this much more interesting story of color against no color, against very creepy trees that are terrific, and this tangle of brush. Just a great bit of storytelling and a very interesting and peculiar, right, juxtaposition of this kind of perhaps cheerful looking colored train, but definitely down on its luck while being gaily colored. It's definitely down on its luck and in a bad place. So just a lot to say, and lovely composition, and the doorway beckons us as well, and we're not sure we want to go in there because it smells. So
Buttermilk Swirl, Neil Shapiro.
So think about the photographer's choice of shutter speed here. If they had shot it with a very fast shutter speed, we wouldn't see the swirl. We wouldn't see the silkiness of the falls. We would see the individual droplets. On the other side, notice now with a slower shutter speed, we see all of these designs in the water itself. We still get the scene, the banks, the trees, etc. But now we have interest in the water. So it was very smart choice by the photographer to add some interest here to this image. So well done on that.
Through the Window, Claudia Jakubowski.
yeah, here's another very personally processed image, and it's and wonderful because of it. Again, because it the foreground obviously has been teased, but we could pretend that that's just the way it looked. But then we're drawn to the window where what is out of focus in the window becomes this peculiar, it's almost like there's a piece of art pinned up, and not that it's a window at all. So the peculiarity is wonderful. And I don't know how much was done to create those effects. I don't care. I just like the fact that it's a very interesting shot, and the stairs are drawing us in. The perspective from the right-hand side is also drawing us in to this odd, out of focus watercolor, really watercolor barn or house in the distance. So again, a very interesting and evocative image that's highly processed and good for it.
Moment in Coimbra, Helena Casey.
So this is a image of contrasts, and I don't mean just the light. But you get the architectural features at the lower half of the image are in silhouette. But those columns in the upper half, you can see they're brightly lit, and you can see all the detail in the ornate part of the capitals there. But then we have the background in the lower half that is highly detailed, these mosaics, but in the upper part, the sky, etc., completely blank. And then we have the person. So we have a lot of different things going on in this image, a lot of things to look at. I like the placement of the person, not smack in the middle, over on the right. And, you know, perfectly centered in the arch and not interfering with the columns, etc. So the timing on that was very good.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to read, but the word actually, this is Coimbra, and it's in Portugal, and they do incredible tile work there. And I recommend Portugal to any of us photo hounds. I've been there for work a couple times. It didn't allow me to spend much time wandering, but what time I did spend wandering was very fruitful. It is a very beautiful place to take pictures, and this is a very, just a great shot taken there.
Red Beauties, Joan Heffler.
This is I guess like our pod before, it's kind of a picture of nothing, not to talk about Seinfeld here, but it's a picture of just this, three flowers. We've seen them all the time, but there's just something wonderfully peculiar about the background, about the way the leaves work, which become this swirling, almost hypnotic element, which draws us into, again, taking pictures of pretty things can almost be a trap, right? Because they're just pretty. And they kind of almost push the photographer aside and push any real storytelling aside, because here I am, just a pretty flower, and you can't do better. But here we have three very pretty flowers that are doing interesting things themselves, especially I think the darkness on the veins on the lower flower. But it's the background that sets them off in this peculiar manner here, a little psychedelic, really. And I promise I'm not on mushrooms. I took them 2 hours ago, and I think I'm completely over them now. But it is psychedelic, and I really appreciate that. It's a lovely picture of pretty flowers that rises above just a pretty picture.
Blown away. Sally Wilsey.
This image has a lot of motion implied in it, between the grasses leaning, the look of the sand being blown, especially towards the top of the image around the sky. And then there's that windmill in the background, and where did that come from? So it makes you think, but it's the feeling of motion of right to left here, and then the undulations in the sand, the shadows. Notice they're not really well defined. Also gives that feeling of things blurred, things moving, like the sand blowing, etc. So this has a lot of good motion and communication to it.
I give the photographer credit for even taking their camera out, in a sandstorm.
It's their previous camera.
Very good point. It may very well be.
Perpetua. Doug Mitchell.
Yeah, Perpetua is an amazing human and terrific figure, and Doug is a terrific photographer again. And this is classic Doug, but taken to an even higher level, because it's not just a pretty person, again, like our flower. Perpetua is beautiful enough to easily rob, again, the photographer any chance for doing anything really unique, because she's just so beautiful on her own, and compelling as a human. But Doug has wrestled this beautiful and this amazing figure and all these curves into something, again, with the correct dress, the interesting plant form kind of background that just brings it again to a higher level. And it's not simply a pretty picture anymore. I don't think anybody would damn it to that. It's just, it's far more interesting. And the fact that she's looking away from us in not just a simple model-y, haughty kind of way, but she actually looks like she's looking at something else that we don't get to see. And it's just very cool, and a beautiful picture, and in a sea of beautiful pictures from Doug Mitchell.
Montana Barn. Kim Kozler.
So this image is about color. And the photographer has done a good deal to really enhance the color through saturation, etc. From the yellow in the grasses to the orange, and then the deep blues in the skies. But notice that the barn is kind of dull compared to the rest of the saturation of the area, which really makes you think then, because it's not what you would expect. You would expect that barn to be hot red, right? So it's interesting the way it's been juxtapositioned with the high color. Otherwise, the composition is very pleasant with the barn off center. Think about how static and boring it would be if the barn was dead center. And then the fence leading into the distance, etc. So there was a lot of thought gone into this image that gives it this ultimate feel.
Vietnam War Memorial. Alan Wiggins.
Yeah, I mean, we all know where we are We've seen that wall so many times, and here it is, also reflecting the environment beyond, but of course has this very poignant and important storytelling element of the red flowers, like blood, right? Let's get all Hitchcock here. You know, it's basically a black and white image for the most part, with the flowers standing in for blood, and it's powerful because of that. And yeah,
I can tell you, living in Washington DC, this is a difficult image to get because
yeah,
there are no people. And
yeah. Oh,
usually
good point. Very good point.
during, you know, I don't know what time of night or day
Hmm.
this was, but usually you see reflections of people in the walls. And also, the Park Service doesn't always pick up all of the flowers and other things that are left there. So you have lots of memorabilia. Usually it's draped along the wall. So the fact that this is the only thing there and there are no people, it's an unusual picture for that.
Yeah, very dramatic.
The tunnel, Marguerite Hill.
Mhm. And this image also is all about the color, right? Otherwise, it's just a tunnel, and it's kind of, okay, we've seen it. It's very symmetrical. You've got the lines of the walls and the lighting and the flooring all receding into the distance where it's brighter. So your eye goes right down that tunnel with the converging lines. So it gives you a wonderful optic going into that, and the colors, the intensity of the saturation there makes it interesting. It draws you in. So it's not just some boring, otherwise, you know, silver or tan or blah. Oh, nice rendering.
Ice Riffle, Marty Bannon.
What a fascinating thing, right? This picture is, well, it doesn't really have to be photography, does it? It's so suggestive in the slow shutter speed in the background that the counterpoint between the ice and that could be, again, this could be a watercolor of sort of water in the background with some of the page coming through right and left. So it's a picture that transcends a bit the photographic process to just be an impression. Again, it's very impressionistic, and it's a lovely composition. It's a little daring, definitely a bit strange, and wonderful. Yeah, it definitely is more than just a photograph, and very lovely because of that.
Crazy Angles, Sharon Silversmith.
So here, notice, you know, we saw the one that we were talking about of the cityscape before that used the very wide angle that had distorted and brought the buildings in. Now we have kind of the opposite, with everything perfectly straight in the image. And then you have these diagonals on the left. So it's a bit of incongruity here, because we have the very straight building on the right, the straight building in the middle, and then the angles on the side, and then we have the reflection that we can see other parts of the city in both the glass of the building in the middle and the glass of the building on the left-hand side. I see Richard holding up his thing against the screen, and I have to agree. Do we need the right-hand side of this
Right.
image? Is that adding to the story? And I would suggest perhaps not. That if you crop in the right-hand image, because there's nothing happening in the sky, and the tan building is kind of, okay, it's there, there's nothing really sexy going on there. But if you crop that in, now we're looking all at the reflections and the angles, etc., and it becomes much more interesting.
Well, the photographer said it, right? They said crazy. And it definitely gets crazier if you guys crop at home. It definitely gets crazier if you crop it right to the edge of that building. It becomes quite madcap.
Partial Sunflower, Joan Heffler.
Yeah, this was a very interesting, like a watercolor technique here, I think, or is that just on my, do you see that, Cynthia, that there's a texture to it?
There
Or
is
is that,
texture, yes.
there is a texture, yeah. And that's an interesting choice and one that I'm not always that crazy about. But it's kind of fun here because it doesn't show itself much in the more detailed parts of the flower on the lower left. So it's interesting. I don't, and I like the fact, I like the composition of it. Again, it's a very typical thing. It's a sunflower, but we're forced to look at it in a different way, both by the texture that's being added to it, also just by the cropping and the, because these elements which would look a little bit normal if you centered them, they become far weirder if you just see part of them. It could be like some part of an insect taken with a micrograph, right? So again, a picture made more interesting by the photographer, and that's what it's all about.
Colorful attire, Marguerite Hill.
So these ladies certainly are picturesque, colorful, what shall we say? Between the hair and the clothes, but they are matching, bless their hearts, and that they are complementary in colors, etc. Posing, but not at the photographer on this bench. You get a little sense of breeze and the wisp of the girl on the right's hair, etc. You don't know what they're looking at. They're obviously interested in something there down the path. But it's a good portrait of two very interesting young ladies.
Kate Ray's Janice Pritchett.
This again is another highly processed image in order to show us color, and that's okay, right? It does two things to me. I think the composition is great. I love the beach, so I'm glad again to be transported to a place that I love. And because of the palette here, and I would say the same thing of the barn picture before that Cynthia discussed, is that because of the fruity color palette, it also looks like many early postcards did, you know, before they had complete control over, of course, any color process. And all the colors were fake because they were black and white pictures that were colorized. And I wish I knew the name of that printing technique. If someone does, they should put it in the comment. But I like those postcards, and both of these images seem to they certainly remind me of that. And then there are the footprints. There are a lot of things to like in this picture, and pretty pictures don't always work for the reasons I was saying before, because they can just be pretty and just pretty. But there is the way the slats are, and they're a little weathered. There's more of a story being told here. And again, I thank the photographer for bringing us there. Is the horizon's probably level, right? I think I'm crooked. Sometimes because of that lump on the left and because of the bright sun in the middle, it looks slightly off. In cases like this, I'm very anal retentive about the precision of the horizon, because there's no excuse for it not to be so, and the horizon's such an overpowering thing. But I will assume that it is perfectly flat.
Food ornament, Linda Tomasulo.
So this is art, right? And the colors are what makes this image also, of the complementary colors of the yellow and the blue, and then just a little red in the background, but not too much darker. And the detail, how sharp it is on the edges of this photo ornament. So you get the face, if you will, of the ornament very clearly and distinctly with the different indentations, etc., around the face on it. So it's well seen and well rendered.
Mother and child, Kim Koza.
Such a big scene, right? With such tiny figures, but that's okay. I think it's very lovely. That pink cloud just seems to be like hired for the event, right? To add some interest and to bring our eye down by swirling down to the mother. I'm maybe in a very micro way if they were dodged just a bit more because they're not in silhouette, right? We can see them, but they're not exactly popping a little bit. And I wouldn't want them to pop too much, I think, but perhaps a tiny bit more just on the figure. Again, it isn't really a comment like that would have made the shot. It's probably me saying I would have tried that variation, and indeed our photographer may have tried that and it didn't work. But it's a very interesting story. Again, a lovely composition, and the photographer fighting the urge to zoom in or run closer and take a more typical picture. So, and we thank them for that, for giving us a far more unique, personal interpretation of the scene. It's really lovely. And the water, of course, is just fantastic.
Fountain of Youth, Ronald Spear.
So here we have another fountain, street scene of these kids enjoying the cooling nature of the water. I think in this case, unlike the winner in the black and white with the water, notice that the photographer again has used a very fast shutter speed to stop the droplets in midair, and the kids, so that they are not blurred, they're all sharp. I think, you know, it's a little chaotic in the scene, hard to distinguish, you know, what a real center of interest would be, other than that it's a group of kids playing in the water.
Table Tableau. Claudia Jacobal.
Yeah, here's a story, right? Where are they? Where did they go? Or when are they coming? Is it, it's far more interesting than it should be, and that's a good thing. It's interesting that the focus is on the chair as though we're waiting for that person to sit down. In some other instance, I might use that as a criticism and say, oh, you know, I want that front plate to be, but no, this person, the photographer saying, no, I want you to wonder, that chair is my subject, and I want you to wonder about that chair. So it is, it's hard not to feel a little lonely, a little melancholy looking at the picture, even though it's a perfectly pleasant dinner, perhaps, that's just about to begin. I still feel that it's a bit melancholy. Or is that just me? No, it's a very, very lovely shot. Compositionally, I think it's great. I'm not sure I need quite as much black space on the right-hand side. And if you might indulge me for a moment, if we shift our heads as if we could, right, slightly to the left and have the right ear of that chair cover that black line at the edge of the napkin, to me, that works a little more. In other words, it's the tension that is built up often between compositional elements in photographs that you have to be very sure if you want that tension. And in this case, I don't think that helps me with the story that's being told here. So I'd rather it was a little more black or a little less. It sounds very like a very minute observation, but that's what it's all about, right? Especially when we create these highly manipulative storytelling scenes like this. It's all about those micro things. So again, not a right or wrong thing, just something that I would experiment had I been there to see how it might have worked. But it's lovely, and the tones are lovely. The blue and the whatever processing that was done here, I applaud all of it because I love all the colors and the textures.
Point Cabrillo Lighthouse in the Fog. Dal Smith.
Again, I'm getting all the moody images, and what makes this moody, obviously, is the fog. Not only because the building is in the script, but also because of the diffuse light from the lighthouse. And that's what makes this image, is the light in the lighthouse. And again, this feeling of solitude, of quietude, because, you know, when you have fog like this, there's no gale out there blowing around, or else we wouldn't have the fog. So it gives you this sense of peace. And then the light there, you could really write a story about the meaning of some of that, but it's very well done. And notice again, the placement of the lighthouse in the frame. It's not smack in the middle. We're not facing it head on. We have a little angle to it. It's on the left-hand side, gives a lot more meaning to the image.
Behind
Ah.
the Falls, Iceland. Janice
Well,
Pritchett.
What a peculiar and wonderful place. I should just shut up for a minute and let everybody look at it. The colors are beautiful. It's such an odd spot in the universe. Thank God there's no other person in it. I would like to think that our photographer was there and no other human being had ever set foot there before. That's what I would prefer. I wondered with Cynthia aloud whether or not I might open it up a tiny bit. Maybe that wasn't even possible where this was shot from, because especially on the left-hand side where the eye, and it is an eye, right? It's Salvador Dali would have just loved this shot. The corner of the eye on the left, I'm just not so sure. I wouldn't want to see a little more of the walls around it. But again, it's a pretty minor comment. It's a wonderful shot taken in a very unusual place, and it's not just a nice picture of an unusual place, but a very personally photographed and processed image of that. I like also something I like a lot about it is that little bit of light that is creeping up the little hillside on the lower left, that green, the fact that it's lighter in value, for some reason that really makes the photograph sing for me. Also the fact that it's lit, the ceiling of this cave is lit, which is just so weird, right? You would expect it to be dark, but it must be coming up from the reflection of the water. And it's just so much interesting. And again, it's surrealist, which we don't expect that. It's an eye that's crying from the top. It's bizarre and wonderful.
Fire Demon. Thomas Whitmore.
Yeah, this is an action shot. And even though the people aren't moving, boy, you really get the impression with the flames, and you're glad that they're standing back and watching. I think it captures the moment well, the burning of this scene that they're trying to, I'm sure, teach us about, don't let your Christmas tree get too dry, etc. Look what happens to your furniture, etc. in just an instance. I think, and you can never pose the people. It would have been nice if the gentleman on the left wasn't there, kneeling in the foreground. You just had the fireman, but sometimes you can't control those things.
Adirondack Milky Way, Linda Tomasulo.
Yeah, Linda, very obviously very patient, Linda. And isn't it wonderful that the devices that we use now allow us to be able to take pictures of like this with somewhat greater ease? And this is a lovely, and again, it's not just the Milky Way up ahead slashing through the sky, but it's very, very nicely composed and a very nice balance between the foreground and the reflection of the stars in the water. There's a lot more than what we first. Again, it's good enough to say what a pretty picture, but I think it exceeds prettiness, and there's enough of the photographer telling us what to look at in here that it isn't just a pretty picture kind of taking over. And lovely. I love the weird cloud patchiness on the upper right that almost looks like an animal skin. Really a wonderful starry picture.
White Wall Dream, Sean Sullivan.
So you don't always have to show the whole car to get some of the most interesting parts. We saw that with the hood on, right? Now we get just this tire. And notice how it's not sharp around the edges, which really forces your eye right into the middle, which is what the photographer wanted us to do. And the tonality of the blues of the ground and the blue of the hubcap, which are matching, and then the red and the white all very pleasant palette going on there. And perfectly centered in the frame.
What? Order now, up to 50% off.
Whoops.
Hey, Judy, can you silence yourself? You may have done that, actually. We heard your television there for a second.
Oh.
Thanks. You're awesome.
Deal-dash.com. The fair and all.
Yeah, you have to do it. You have to do it again, Judy. It didn't. There we go. Perfect.
There
Thank
we
you.
go.
Next.
Oh, we're done with that one. I'm sorry. I'm still over here. Rolling ahead. Sharon Silversmith.
Yeah, kids having fun. Obviously a lovely shot. I mean, you can't go wrong with kids. The fact that the fast shutter speed helps here because of the hay caught in the melee of these children playing. Again, I talk a lot about pretty things because I think I like pretty things as much as the next person. But in this case, I think that the prettiness of the kids in the hay, it takes over a little bit for me. Maybe I would like to see it in black and white to take away some of that power of it just being pretty and be more about the story of these kids wrestling with each other and not look so Kodachrome sweet. But that's just again, this is one of my Richard's, try it. Let's just try it that way. So I think perhaps I might have liked the story better where it's black and white. But again, good composition, great moment with the kids, and we love to capture great moments. It's not that easy. Yeah, lovely.
Lone Tent. Connie Frisbee Howard.
So the interesting thing about this image is that it takes you a few minutes to find the tent. Because when you first look at it, you're like, oh, look at that dilapidated barn or whatever there, because it's in the middle. And then you say, oh, look at the wonderful scene, look at the clouds, what an interesting day. Look at the mountains in the distance, boy, they're really high, I'd like to hike those. And then we come back to the barn and we say, oh, and look at the corral or whatever on the right-hand side. And eventually we get over to the tent and say, whoa, now there's a nice place to spend the night. So the tent is almost the afterthought in this. And hopefully while you were there, you took lots of pictures in this gorgeous place. And maybe you came over and you got the tent right in the more dominant in the photograph than it is right now, because you kind of miss it. But great place. We'd like to spend the night there, right?
Cliffs have a downside. Just saying. Shauna Kaywood.
Yeah. Again, more fog. Does anybody go out when the weather's good in this group? No, it's really lovely. The processing is groovy. The greens were probably exaggerated, and I like that in this picture because they become this peculiar element because they look like they're grass, but grass growing where grass shouldn't grow, or maybe there are some other shrubs. I don't care. I like them. I like our out of focus images. I'm almost a little distracted by some of the trees in the foreground, but not so much that I would have gotten a chainsaw out and taken any of them down. Very interesting because we have the autumnal images in the foreground overlaying the evergreens in the background, which are part of a dreamscape, right? They're not even in the real world. So it's like it's the real world of autumn against this dreamscape of these evergreens. So again, gives me a lot to talk about. So I must like it, and it obviously moved me. I'm not sure that I wouldn't have cropped out that one partially shown trunk on the left. Again, it's very funny. It's a quick one, I hope. But in photographing products years ago, you can see my hand stuck out. It was that if you put a wristwatch here on my wrist, and if you crop it here, it's a great shot from Rolex, right? and there's the hand, and it's an important hand. Let's say it's a famous conductor, and he has his Rolex on. And if you crop it here, you open it up just a little more, this creepy thing happens that the arm looks like it's going on forever. You know it can't be. You know the person's probably not a freak. You have no reason to believe the person's a freak, and yet they look freaky. So exactly what we include and what we don't include makes a big difference. And again, in this case, I think I would have been, the fantasy is a little better for me if I just lose that one tree.
Lovebirds, Connie Frisbee Howard.
Yes, very good. They're almost in that perfect heart shape between the beaks and their necks, etc. Right? Good moment between the two birds, I think, is an image. The one thing that detracts is the red on the right-hand side. And, you know, not only do our eyes naturally go to the brightest spot, they also go to the most saturated spot, and that is most saturated. So perhaps this would have been better in black and white, and you wouldn't have to deal with the red. Or you could just crop in and crop that out and not worry about it. You'll still get the birds flying in the background. Notice that they're out of focus, which is fine. It gives us the impression of what's going on in the background so that we do focus on the two birds.
Yet the other birds look like they're saying, they're in love. They look happy.
A reflection at John Brown's farm. Dan
Yeah,
Steve.
I love reflection pictures. It's such a cheap shot, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just like such a wonderful. Everything has to be kind of right to get this level of saturation and clarity and it is nature conspiring with the photographer to create an impressionist image, right? You know, no darkroom trickery or anything. I'm sure the color's a little enhanced here, but again, I'm okay with that. I love what it does, what the oddness of the ripples do to the window frames too. It really, I mean, there's nothing interesting about just a picture of that house composed that way. And I'm pretty sure the fact that we're in this tight as well is that the photographer probably had to crop in because there were some plants in the background and stuff. But I'm glad it's of course the yellow flowers that run along the bottom that really sell this shot and make it, even though we intellectualize, right? We understand that this is a reflection. There's something about the correctness of the uprightness of this that still confuses us a little bit. And I just, that's a lovely thing. Again, think of this picture without the yellow tips on those plants, and it would kind of just sit there. So well captured.
Moon setting on the Hudson, Sally Wilsey.
Also a feeling of a calm, no ripples on the water, perfect reflections, the fog just coming up off the water, a little bit of moon or sun in the upper left, a very calm palette, very muted colors, almost pastel. I think the photographer probably tried to maybe get a little too much with the reflection of the moon in the water. Think about, you know, so one of the things that makes it calm feeling is that the horizon is in the middle. But I think in this case, because there's not much happening in the water other than that reflection, what if we took about a quarter off of the bottom? Still want to get the reflection of the trees, but then it really shows us, brings us up with the fog into the sky and the little bit of color that's up there. And we'll still get the moon up above it, but I think it would give a little more emphasis on the color in the sky.
The Watcher, Thomas Whitmore.
Yeah, this horse is, I took in a show last year and I bought the book, and it was pictures of these, actually I didn't see the show. That's right, wow, The Power of the Mind. I bought the book instead and didn't see the show. It had just left where I was actually. And it was pictures of that were taken for some series from, I believe, Kodak. And this just has that same emblematic kind of Kodak moment. It's everything's just right about it, and it's telling us this simple story of a horse at a rail. And again, it comes from the film era. It's a very innocently composed. Nothing's fancy about the picture, and that's okay. It's a nice straight shot of a horse at a fence. Again, in a way that more people used to shoot, frankly, than they do now. And it's the angle, right? Let's just get that out of the way. It's the angle that makes the shot worth it at all. It would not be interesting much at all if it weren't for the angle. So, but you know what? Got to give the horse some credit. That's a cool looking horse.
Who shot Bambi? Ronald Spear.
Okay, so this is telling a fun story. You know, the abominable snowman crying over his dead friend here. And it's just a lot of fun. I think maybe you could, you know, from the exposure, just lighten it up a little bit, maybe crop it in some so that we don't have to see all the trees and the fence and everything. We just want to look at the snowman and his friend. It certainly tells a fun story. Again, something that would work in a kid's book.
Flatiron chrysalis. Chrysalis.
Chrysalis, yeah. This is a terrific spot in Manhattan. This picture's taken from like 25th Street. And what makes it a little bit special here is the kind of yellowing of the tones. There's some dodging going on, which is evident in the building standing out from the background, and perhaps a little more masking the building off before it was dodged would have prevented the sky from going light around the building. But a little old darkroom trick there. Far easier to do now, frankly, in the digital age than it was in the darkroom. I can tell you, I spent many hours and torturous moments trying to make that happen in the real darkroom. But easy for us now. Again, if you just kind of trap the sky and leave it out, and then you can do all the crazy brutal things you want to do to the building to pull it out. But very interesting. I like all the little it's very detailed. I want to say that I want to crop in more, but it's a particular shot in this photographer's eye. The slight compositional thing I will say is that the tension of the Flatiron building against the sky is a little much, and maybe would have been better loosened up a tiny bit. It's a bit tense. It brings the eye there, and there's no reason for the eye to be there. So it should either be perhaps cropped a little more. I don't think that works, but maybe a tiny bit more sky. But again, as photographer, and also it's a very light place in Manhattan. It's a great shot. Actually, it's a great area to photograph people too. Either if you're bringing your friend model with you or shooting people just walking by. I was there recently with a film crew from Spain, and I brought them there. They were visiting New York, and I was helping them in the city get some of the shots that they want. And we were standing right around this neighborhood, and the light is just exceptional, and always has been. Again, it's one of those odd places in New York City, like Times Square, where there's a far more access of the sky to the ground, and you just get terrific shots that are hard to capture in other parts of the city.
Seek and you shall find. Shauna Kaywood.
So I think this is a good find of this snail on the grass here. I doubt that he was moving very fast. So I would ask the photographer, why did you shoot it that wide open? I know you want the background to go to neutral, but it would be even better if not just his shell was sharp, but if his head and his antennas were sharp as well. But otherwise, I think it's a good composition, and the vertical works very well with this.
Rows of Candles, Joe Catronio.
Yeah, this reminds me of our tunnel picture that we saw before, the colored tunnel. that the composition's certainly interesting. This little like soldiers, this lineup of candles. I don't know if this, I don't know if this is a complete fabrication of some kind within the camera, because some of the candles actually seem almost not to be touching each other, but overlapping. And, but again, the color temperature, which, you know, we always, maybe we don't all always, but you tend to think of the correct color temperature. And obviously, there's no attempt here to make anything correct. And that's pretty wonderful. And it does tell us this weird story. And again, now I'm noticing that even the flame is green. So the photographer is telling this story and saying, there's this one weird outlier candle in the middle of the sea of rose, like dull rose petal colored candles. And again, very personal and an odd thing to tell a personal story about, right? Candles. So there's a lot of, it raises interesting questions, and there's something peculiarly anthropomorphic about it too. They look like little soldiers or maybe priests or KKK members. There's something about it. Anyway, it's a far more interesting picture than if someone simply were to tell you that the club is now looking at a picture of some candles lined up. I will say compositionally, since a lot is intentional here, the fact that there's an open spot on the left-hand side where it's just candle and there's no flame breaking it up. And I'm not sure that that wouldn't be better if we didn't lose. I'm cropping in. Even if we lost even all three of those candles up on the left, they just kind of don't exactly work with the rest of the composition for me. Again, because we're supposed to see the sea of marching flames. And those three seem to be a little out of step because of the composition. But again, a very interesting story being told. Not quite sure what it is, but I like it.
Monarch on a flower, Dan Steen.
So on this one, notice that the butterfly is completely sharp, top to bottom. So you can really see the details. He's in perfect condition. And you also get some of that sharpness because of the distance between the subject and the background. The flower is sharp as well, but you still have modeled background so that it doesn't interfere with the image. I think, you know, we always like to have things rules of thirds, right? But maybe here we don't need all of the image on the left, and you could crop it in, make it almost more like a square, perhaps, which would draw our attention to the butterfly, who is gorgeous and well shot.
West Danville Footbridge.
Here we go again with it's a very lovely place, and thank you for that. We love to be taken to beautiful places by photographers. It's one of the things that we can do for folks. And the water in the foreground's very lovely. The time of year is interesting. Some things appear to be autumnal and other things green. So it's that early autumn, perhaps, when some of the first trees are giving up to winter. This might have been interesting to also take as a time exposure with a neutral density filter and to abstract the reflection in the water even more by doing so. That might have been an interesting way to handle this. There's some part of me too that wants to see a tiny bit more above the covered bridge, but it's not like an egregious miscropping in my opinion. But I'm just interested. Again, it's me overlaying my intentions here, but perhaps I'd like to see more. But again, lovely, and it's not just centered. And again, when we're at a beautiful place, the beautiful place tells us to just take a picture, center it, get it in focus. And again, it's the photographer saying, no, I have a more personal way that I would like to show this. And for that, it is far better.
Flower, Fred Moody.
So this is the photographer trying to communicate something with the viewer in that these flowers are not in peak condition, right? Nor are the leaves, as you can see there. And the background has been basically taken away with the exception of the vignetting that's around that. So again, with the lighting on the flowers, our eye goes directly to them, not only because of the lighting, but also because of the saturation of them. And it tells a story of things a little bit past prime, a little manipulated, but tells the story that the photographer is trying to communicate.
Yeah, Connie, we can see you from time to time, but you probably you don't want to keep popping up in the frame. So if you could silence yourself, and I think Bernie popped up there for a moment too. So it's iPhone Connie and Bernie. We can still see you from time to time when you make noises. Well, this picture is really lovely, right? We don't need to see any more of this flower than we do see, which is, we just don't. It's lovely and it's not perfectly centered again. It's a beautiful thing, but it's not taking over and centering itself. It's lovely in composition. The textures are just beautiful on the petals. They make us see something that is, again, very, very typical. And the fact that they blow out towards the top isn't that just way better? And I don't know how it was done, or I don't care. I just like it. And it forces us to adore the veins in the petals below. And there's just so much to like about this picture. And I'll leave it at that. The beautiful, again, the green and then the beautiful warm tones that are around it. It's just a flower. And there's a million of them in flower shops right now, but it's so obviously personally interpreted for us that it becomes very special.
Art under Route 787. Villa.
Well, talk about taking us to a place that many of us probably have never seen, would not ordinarily go looking for artwork like this. I think it's a great capture in the positioning of the three painted columns here. You get the whole story here. You've got the bridges above, you've got the greenery, and then you've got these underneath it in an otherwise bland situation, because you can see the pillars behind it that haven't been painted, and they're just normal concrete stained pillars. So it tells that story very well.
Cynthia, to fill in a little bit, this is a very wonderful art project going on in Albany, New York, and being driven by the Albany Center Gallery, and Tony Idasico is the director. And I have been in this environment many times. I photographed, I believe the column on the right is, I think it's Taini Asili, who's a musician, but did one of the paintings. And I photographed her there for a magazine that's no longer being published in the area. And this may be actually, if not one of, the best picture I've ever seen taken of the area to describe it. So kudos to the photographer for that. And it's such a compelling, lovely area that maybe we wouldn't immediately think to use each element in it compositionally, but it's a great spot. It's a great spot for anyone to visit and shoot. But this is just a terrific capture there, really terrific.
Corner of Lark and Orange. Rich Robinson.
Yeah, there's a little, it's very painterly in drawing our eye to what's going on with that person in the environment. I didn't want to blow it up to see. I wanted to leave it at that. But although it is a contemporary picture, we know that for many reasons, there's something about that person where I think they have a phone up to their head, I think, but that could just be a mutton chop sideburn as well. And it looks like the red garment could be from the 18th century. There's something timeless about it. Having said that, I kind of don't need the car, the Jeep. We don't see a lot of these pictures, certainly at critiques like this. There are pictures that are kind of celebrated for their kind of wrongness and oddness of juxtaposed elements. And There's no real purpose to them, and it makes them. But I'm not so sure that works here, because again, that weird green wall, the red outfit is just so good that this is a severe crop, ladies and gentlemen. But you know, crop that in so the car is gone, and you're cropping it right up, and not even looking at the sewer grate in the ground. You're just looking at the little bit of sidewalk in the foreground and the bricks to the right. I just think it's such a lovely capture. Color temperature is, this goes back to that weird tube that we saw before with the strange colors. Kudos to the photographer not trying to correct that scene, right? And trying to show us what it really looked like. That's one of those fun times where turning to tungsten or turning to, since you can't get I'm pretty certain you could not get anything like close to the color temperature correct. So instead of that, just running headlong into making it this color graphic composition, terrific. And here we have exceptionally beautiful colors and weirdnesses happening that aren't even real. And all of a sudden I'm grounded by just seeing the street and the Jeep, and I don't want to. And that's extremely personal, but that's what critiquing is all about. Anyway, I love what's in this picture more than I love the whole picture.
Como Milano ceiling, Greg F.
What makes this image is the textures in the columns leading up to the ceiling. And of course, you look at the ceiling because it is more saturated than the rest of the church. But you've got great architectural lines going on here with the arches and then the columns themselves and the door and the windows at the far end. It's really well done. The symmetry of it just helps to emphasize all of the different architectural features that you're seeing here. But again, it's the texture and the really the contrast, the minute contrast in the stonework, etc., that set it apart.
I like the vignetting, don't you too, Cynthia?
Yeah,
In the
that
corners,
adds.
yeah, it's really interesting. It really is. It makes it elevates it. Shouldn't. Like, how did that work? But it does. It definitely does make it better.
Hoarfrost on Bush, Bill Lanahan.
Very fascinating and peculiar meteorological moment. That's something that isn't even real, right? They would have melted if the photographer exhaled. Again, super interesting. I'm not exactly certain that it's composed just right. I don't know what that means here, but my mind is trying to make it a vertical too. And I don't know whether that would, let me turn my computer up. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'd like that a little differently. Anyway, but what is wonderful about this picture, of course, is the incredibly rare moment that it brings it to. Extremely ephemeral moment, like we're getting to see snowflakes hanging out with each other. So I am grateful that it was captured in this way. And there's some pretty terrific tones as well.
Architectural abstract, Bill Olivo.
Yeah, and what makes it abstract is you can't put it in context. You don't know if this is a whole side of a building, if it's just a little piece of a window, perhaps, and that makes you think, and that's always a good thing. The darkness on the left-hand side, which really emphasizes the slight curve that's going on here. The very even color palette in it. And the texture that you see in the dirt or whatever in the stonework makes you scratch your head and say, what am I looking at here? So that works as an abstract very well.
Sunset, Fred Moody.
Yeah, here's another one where the fall off on the bottom really helps this picture, that little blackening. A completely impressionistic view And really, there is processing by the photographer, but it really is, in a sense, just a picture, right? It's the reflection and the sky and enough of a slower shutter speed to show the water is just a surface, a reflecting surface. But the peculiarity of some of the tones and the fact that we can see some of the green, it's just there's more than meets the eye here. And the distraction of even that little vegetation in the front actually makes the picture better. And that's not always the case. Again, I'm the guy with the chainsaw. I'd like to always, so there's always a tree I'd like to kill somewhere in a picture. But in this case, I like that that's there and it complements the fade off on the right. So again, a very interesting shot that the more I look at it, frankly, the more there are things to say about it.
The old citrus grove, Ron Klein.
So this image has a lot of interesting things, and of course we have the starburst of the sun, but look at the clouds above. Wow, where did that come from? Right. And then we've got, because it's so high key, look at the grasses in the foreground, and then the building, and then the round object at the top there. And you're like, what in the world is going on here? You've got nice light coming into the side of the inside of that structure, which is a little incongruous as well. So there are a lot of things here that make you stop and say, whoa, let's take a harder look at this. And I think that's good. You want the viewer to stop, think about hanging it in a gallery. And do they just walk through the room and say, oh, those are nice pictures? Or do they stop and look at it and say, and try to examine it more?
It was maybe not taken on our planet, right? Maybe. Like it's a structure. It seems like it was built by people, but I'm not so sure.
Which way do I go? John Sullivan.
Yeah, an obvious story here, right? Of the signs. There's some effort to throw the building out of focus, which is really important, I think, in order to see what the signs have to say and to make them pop. But maybe it could have been a little more here. Maybe the building could have been slightly more out of focus in order to, because I don't think, except that you are at a place and you're being told that to the right and the left of it are other places. I'm not so sure I needed to see as much of the place perfectly in focus. That's all. But it is certainly it's a quirky little piece of tourism item, the sign, and it's captured in a way that's not just straight against the sky, which I appreciate. But again, I would have played with the focus maybe a little more.
The Stair, Greg Effner.
Yeah, so lots of owls this evening, and you know, we saw the other one as a black and white image, and this is roughly also a monochrome image with the exception of the eyes, right? Which draw you in and you forget everything else. Once you see those eyes, that's all you can see in this image. But notice that the his face, the feathers around it, everything is tack sharp. The tonalities are well held. I mean, you can see in the white feathers all the details that you want. So it really becomes a very, very capture. You could even think about cropping it down really tight and just have it be the bird. So it's only about a third of the total image. And just have it be about the bird. We don't need to see the tree or the background, just him.
Mountains of North Harris. Dallas.
Finally, I get some atmosphere to talk about. Now, this is a lovely atmospheric situation. I love the it's interesting. Recently, an artist whose work I help in the creation of occasionally, he shows me pieces that he's making, and he was making a silk screen, and it reminded me of an artist from some time ago called Folon, Folon, I think, and that did silk screens and used this kind of palette and also, frankly, this kind of tonality too. So this again, it's a lovely shot and it's atmospheric, and we have just the right amount of. I mean, if you put a UV filter on this, you'd want to shoot the person who handed it to you, because the ultraviolet filter would just kill it, because the haze is working for us here, especially, and wouldn't work as well, right, if we didn't have the unhazy bits, just the right amount in my opinion here, of that foreground black strip. And then if you took it out, it would still be a good shot, but I like that it's there. It becomes really a ragged edge, right? It's not really a landmass. And then that black strip that comes in the center is roughly lower in the center of the frame. Just terrific stuff going on. And again, this would be an interesting one to take and make like a giclée of, a print, and mimicking again a watercolor reproduction. It would be interesting to see how it would do in that process. But a very lovely place that we've been brought to and captured it in a lovely way. And the color processing of the image is really important here. I don't know how close it is to what the person actually saw. I don't care, because I like this version very much.
Staying clean, Alan Wiggins.
Yeah, this is an excellent action shot. Notice again, the choice of shutter speed here, that you can see all the pieces of dirt flying up, and it goes to the title of the horse in front is clean and everybody else is getting splattered with all the mud and the yuck going on. And the jockey in the front is also relatively clean at this point. But notice you've got separation between all the horses. You can see all the horses' faces. You can see all the jockeys' faces. This is one of those rare instances when everything is working in the photographer's favor. The light is overcast, so we don't have any deep shadows. It's really a great scene and tightly cropped. We don't need to see anything else other than the horses. Very well done.
Honorable mentions. We have 4 honorable mentions. Land of the Giants, Neil Shapiro.
Yeah, very an amazing place. Again, I'm glad I'm not there taking the picture, but the mountains used to perfect effect to create composition, and then also our eye being led into the quote unquote subject matter of tiny people is just great. And just think, if you went a little lower and the people were lost against the rocks in the background, that would be terrible. And again, maybe with a 10-foot, 20-foot ladder, it might be even more interesting. But again, everything is pointing towards the center here. It's a really interesting set of compositions, and we have to thank the photographer for not fighting the urge to zoom in and take a picture of the people, because that certainly would not have worked as much. A very interesting shot of a very strange place. A glacier, I assume.
Sunflower, Joe Catronio.
Yeah, so we really liked the treatment on this image, where you get all the detail and the little hairs on the green part of the flower, and yet we have the emerging petals there that haven't quite popped out yet, and they look a little distorted, right? But everything else is tack sharp, and the framing of it as a square really emphasizes all of that. So this was an obvious choice.
Great Dune, Elena Casey.
Just again, now we have really tiny people, but isn't that wonderful? I mean, just what is the subject here? Does it matter? No, it's a beautiful they could be folds. I'd like to think that the same photographer might have noticed folds in sheets on someone's bed and could have taken the same picture with some ants going by. You know, it just works no matter how you cast it. It's just so lovely and so interesting, and makes these gigantic dunes seem gigantic again, but also in my mind's eye, they could be very tiny and microscopic as well. Just an interesting shot that plays with the mind. And I don't think I've ever seen people represented quite so small in an overall image that have any impact at all. And they certainly do here, because they're walking through the composition in just the way the photographer wanted. So again, just a great shot. Super interesting.
Next honorable mention. Yellow on yellow, Marty Ben.
So we have another yellow flower here, but the key here obviously is the little spider. That's also of the same tonality. And everything is tack sharp. Again, it's in a square format, so that we are really focused on the center here of the flower and of its resident, and the petals radiating out from it, and the texture and the fact that you can see all of the veins in the petals as well. It makes it for an excellent composition.
And our winner is Canyon Rim's View by Bill Lanahan.
Yeah, it's my turn next, but I'm sure we speak in chorus here. There's just everything to love about this picture. The perfect snaking of the, excuse me, no prompt there for nothing. And the perfect snaking of the silver water coming through that landscape, the beams of light that create that light zone also on the lower right, that without it simply wouldn't be as great a picture. Painfully perfectly cropped, I think. It could go a little wider, but I don't think that would make it any better. And I certainly wouldn't want it to be any tighter. And the sky has, we've seen skies, it's just such an interesting overlay of what the clouds are doing there, right? The ones in the foreground are so wispy and seem so close to us, and the others seem miles and miles away. And it's just this, and the fact that they conspired here to help our photographer differentiate the different hillsides from one another, that little bit of fog that's trapped. And it's just, there's just and if you notice on the bottom of the photo, on the left-hand side, there's a little bit of a curve coming in, maybe, and an implied curve on the right. And again, it just forces us to look through this, to say, it's the photographer saying, look where I'm looking, and feel what I was feeling when I was there. And a tremendous success at that. Kudos.
Congratulations, Bill. Well, that concludes the contest for this evening.
Well, they were all wonderful images, you know, they were all winners already, and Richard and I had said, you know, what can we say? They are all winners. It's hard to come up with the finalists, but excellent body of work for everybody.
Thank you for the judging. It was very good comments.
Thank you, and sorry about all the problems, but yes, for
Yeah,
everyone.
fiasco to start out there.
Yeah, it was really
over, not too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Richard and Cynthia.
Yeah, it was an honor, like Cynthia said, it was just an honor to get to spend the time that we did and looking at them and appreciate them and speaking to you guys about them. It was really an honor. There really is a lovely grouping that shows the depth of your club, and the fact that you take your work really seriously, and just great stories. I feel really filled with wonderful stories.
Great job, guys.
Good
Thanks
job.
to,
I thought the
thanks to
comments
the
were excellent.
judges. Yeah. Thanks to
The
the
next-
judges.
And the
Yeah.
next time, cookies, okay? The next time, coffee, cookies. I work cheap. No, it would be wonderful to see you all in person again. And I know none of you are wearing pants now, which is really scary.
Thought about that. Good night, everyone. It's not
All right,
gonna go.
good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.